Okay, see if this is working. It looks like it is. Sorry that I'm pasting it so late. Hopefully I make it before it's done. So my name is Juan Ramirez. I am a student for Python, and this is going to be my final. Hopefully I put all the variables and all the description in this correctly for me to explain it. So from the beginning, I always had to download as it was per the instructions. As it was stated here, that we had a download, and I obviously won't really go into it because this is your description. So if I go through, the first step would be the importing, and the imports like I use was the argument parse, and that's where like the library is using for parsing command line arguments. Request is the library for making HTTP requests. And to be honest, I don't know how to explain the BS4, but I knew that I had to use the BS4 to import the beautiful soup, which is the beautiful soup is a library for pulling the data out of like HTML and XML files. And to read some of the files, I had to use the OS. And that is also like a library for interacting with operating systems. And I imported JSON for the library for working with JSON data. Of course, I didn't do them all at once. I didn't. I did every section step by step, and I didn't implement all the imports until I got to every single one of them. You know, like when I got to the the JSON files. At least that's what I call it. It's the JSON files to be able to read. Somewhere around here, I believe, or this one. But anyways, and as given per the instructions, the first thing that I did was I printed the name, and obviously that's a function that prints out to the screen. And then I gave it the parse argument. And the parse argument is a function of parsing command lines. And it's a document string describing the function's purpose. Like the rparse.argument parser creates an argument parser. The .add, I don't know what the little thing is called. That little thing in between the lower slash, the ground slash. But I know that the O is like it's the output file name without an extension. It adds an argument to a file name, and the return parser it's like this part right here. Parses the command line arguments and returns the result. So pretty much puts everything together. And then to get the next file in queue, you gotta get next file in queue. And that is a function for extracting the first file name from the web page. And then the extracts the first file name from the population check queue web page, a doc string describing the function's purpose, and for the var URL, which is the HTTP, that URL of the population check will queue the web page. And then the threshold, as described, is a threshold for considering the web page fresh. Ouch. And then I added, for us to be able to reach that, we had to get like the get. And so the response will equal to the request dot get var URL, which sends a get request to the specified URL. And we will receive and store that information, the response. So now we're gonna check if the web page is fresh enough. So if well, I guess I won't read the whole thing, but the explanation of this area is this will check if the web page is fresh by examining the response headers, and if the page is not fresh enough, it will print a warning and return an empty string. Now we get to use the beautiful soup, and this section, the beautiful soup uses the beautiful soup to parse the HTML, the content inside of it, of the response, then finds the first list item, as for the Linux list, under the parentheses, parentheses, quotation, single quotation, and then li in the HTML. And then if that is correct, we're gonna do check if a list item is found, and if it is found, that returns the text content of the list item. Otherwise, it will return an empty string. But I deleted the empty string. I didn't like how it was looking there, but I left it, unfortunately. This one took me a long to make it this simple. I just kept deleting stuff until I got the right answer. Where are we? Okay, so now we're gonna go into the determine output file name, and that is, this will be the function for determining the output file name based on the input arguments. So first we determine the output, and this will be a doc string describing the function's purpose. Where am I? And then the var output file. What this does is it initializes the variable to store the output file name. So a little further down. Okay. So where are we? I'm lost now. So we're going to return, and if it checks if the output file name is provided, if provided, it appends a dot out to the specified output file name. If not provided, replace the .txt with the dot out in the input file, and then that's where you get the return. The determined output file name, and then the extension. It checks. It's a function for checking if the output file already exists, and then if it checks if the output is a doc string describing the function's purpose, and then the file path, the OS, checks if the specified file path exists. I was having a lot of trouble finding the path. Check the population. And this one was the biggest pain in the butt, and I don't think I got this right at all. But a function of checking population numbers. And if it checks population numbers, A is a doc string describing the function's purpose. The base URL, as you know, was what it was given, the information. And the URL is simple. Is the base URL is simple as well, was the information that was given, and the base URL for the master data service is what it would be. Then the URL parameters, or params, is a dictionary containing parameters for the GET request that we did earlier. Let's see, and then we're gonna try, which is, it uses a try exempt block to handle potential errors, because I was not getting this to work at all. So makes a GET request to master the data service with specified parameters, checks any HTTP errors, loads a JSON response into the state data variable. Step 5. Now we open the input file in a read mode. It reads all the lines in the output, and the input file, sorry, reads all the lines in the input file. Then the output constructs the absolute path for the output file, opens the output file in write mode. It writes the header to the output file. And then the for line int lines, it reiterates through each line of the output file, starting from the second line. It strips white space and splits each line into a list using a comma as a delimiter. It extracts the customer ID and population as integers. And then this part checks, step 7 is checks if the customer ID is in the state data and if the population is not an exact match. If so, writes the corrected record to the output file, including the state name and corrected population. And it sets the absolute path of the output file because I was not getting it to print. And then the exempt is what catches any exceptions that occurred during the try block, returns an error message. And then that's the def main, which is the main the orchestration of my main. So the main pretty much calls back everything together, but starts off with it calls the print name for my name on the screen. It initializes to store the initialize an empty string variable to store the preferred output file name. Then uses the parse argument to function a parse command line argument, which is the args. Args now contains the parse arguments. It checks if the output file name is provided as command line argument through the -o or output file name. It provided updates with the provided name. It calls for the next generation, the function to receive the next file to process from the population check queue. The result is to store the file to the process variable. Then it calls for a function to determine the output file name based on the input file name preferred, result order sort value. Step 6, this big part right here, checks if there's any file to process. It prints all the information put together about the file process in the output file, whether previous output file was overwritten. And then 7 calls for the check population function to check population numbers for accuracy and generate an output file. The result is to store in the file process variable. The explanation file was processed successfully. Print an appropriate message based on the result. And print if there's any no files to process. And then the main part, if name, checks the script for being run directly, not imported as a module. If so, calls the main function to start an execution.